Welcome to another episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Daikomyo-sai Miller here from Warrior Concepts. But then again, you know that unless you're just tuning in. So this week, we're going to take a look at this concept called Henka. And again, like a lot of principles and concepts that we have, this one can go really, really deep. So I'm going to allude to a couple, but we're going to narrowly focus our attention today on something that is, well, at least for my students anyway, it's an intermediate training kind of thing, regardless of whether that means you're in the intermediate study or belt levels. We introduced this idea in Module 2 in our curriculum. So whether you're there or you're just taking any given technique, right, and running it through, I don't have it up here yet, but I will in a bit, this traditional skill development, proficiency development formula, right? We're actually focusing on that whole thing in at the next intensive that we're doing in January. So if you're not already signed up for that, you might want to come in. We've got some really cool breakout sessions by guest instructors as well. So hopefully you can make that. Okay, so Henka, right? Henka is typically defined, or conventionally defined, as change or variation. Okay. So change or variation, right? But ultimately it starts with a technique, right? So the question I have for this episode, if you've been around for a while, is Henka a technique variation or is it something else? And we're going to talk about some of these something else's that people who are something else have come up with, but I'm also going to point to something that's beyond the technique orientation, right? I'm a very practical, pragmatic kind of person, but I can't disregard certain things that Hatsumi Sensei has taught, certain things that come from our Mikyo training that alludes to this idea of constant change, constant adaptation, right? One of the things that we say in Mikyo is that the only universal constant is change, right? Which really bakes some people's noodles, but hey, there you go, right? But let's start, like I like to do, right, with a problem, okay? So there are a lot of practitioners, students and teachers, right, who don't understand this idea of Henka, right? Thinking that if they start out doing, they start out doing one thing, right, and that's not working, they can just flip and do something else. And it's not that you can't use the word Henka for that because they changed course, but that's not how they're using it. If you listen to the way they describe what they're doing, right, they're confusing that with this idea of I'm varying the technique because something was off over here and I couldn't get the shot in where the kata says the shot's supposed to go, or with the fist or whatever, right? So I switched it out for something that still does the same thing. Okay, we'll talk about that in a bit, right? What they do is something's not working, so they just flat out change course, which is absolutely fine, right? This is a type of Henka, right? We change course, but they can't call that a variation of the kata they were supposed to be doing, the technique they were supposed to be doing, right? So if we're doing Ichimonji no kata, if we're doing koku, if we're doing renyo, if we're doing seion, whatever, right? There's certain things about that technique that allow, not just allow it, but that give it that name, right? That we're pointing to. There's something about it. We'll talk about that farther down, okay? A whole bunch of concepts we're going to go through. But any Henka, right? Any actual variation, technique variation, right, has to still be doing the same thing the original was going to do. And for folks that can't get past, this fist to that target, or it was a kick, but you punched or whatever, they can't get past that. They're going to have a hard time with this, okay? But here's a quote from Hatsumi Sensei. He said this over and over again, right? And there's actually video evidence online. You might be able to bump into this every once in a while because, once it's on the internet, well, there it stays, right? But he's always said there's a huge difference, right? Big difference, huge difference, right? Between doing true Henka, right? And doing whatever you want, right? It's not the same. Yes, I know that you changed, but there's something that's going on in here, okay? So yes, there's a change, but we're talking about a variation, right? How do you have a variation of something that itself you don't have? Okay? You can't vary something. If you make up something, that it's that thing. But if you start on a certain course and you need to get over here and you need a certain end result, but an obstacle or something changed in the way, and you adapted to that change and still produce the same end result, that's a variation, right? So we're going to take a look at how this kind of stuff shows up, right? But in the case of these folks that keep throwing this stuff around, one of two things is going on, okay? Either they're using the term Henka as a cover-up for sloppy shit, crap technique, right? Their taijutsu is lousy, right? So they can't duplicate the kata. So they really failed. We look at that SHU-HA-RI model way back, all right? This traditional formula for taking a technique from learning it through understanding it through transformation, through growing beyond it. Okay, so they never did this well, right? Ego is so attached to being, not even being like Hatsumi Sensei. People fantasize about being Hatsumi Sensei, and back in the day, and I don't know if they still do it today because I just got to a point where I just stopped paying attention to these nutballs. But way back in the day, people wanted to be here so much that you'd see these American or Canadian or UK teachers, right, who were actually using broken English, broken Japanese, so they could sound like Hatsumi Sensei, right? They weren't trying to be like him. They weren't trying to have the same skills. They weren't aspiring to go through the same process he did to get where he is. No, we were going to just do the drive-up window version and what do some people say? Fake it till we make it. Well, you can't fake something you don't know, right? So what they're doing is they're playing a role. They're playing a part, okay? And I know this is going to piss off a whole lot of people. This will be an unpopular episode. So be it. I'm here for the folks that actually want to learn something, okay? Okay, so again, one of two things, right? So either they're using this term Henka as a cover-up for shit technique, right? They can't do it anyway, right? So every time they run into a problem, and what they do is they grab the person, force them to the ground, or they put in more speed, more force, more whatever, right? As long as the guy ends up on the ground, they go, see, that was a Henka, right? Because like I couldn't do that other thing, so I did this thing, and yeah. But just because he ended up on the ground doesn't mean that you used that technique or it was a bona fide variation of that technique, right? Any more than just because you're going through ninjutsu training, right? Budo taijutsu, Nippo taijutsu, Fred and Barney jutsu, I don't care, right? If you're going through this program and you ended up having to defend yourself out on the street, just because you won doesn't mean that you won or that you survived using ninjutsu. You could have shit your pants and did something and lucked out, guy tripped over a curb, fell and bumped his head, and you get bragging rights out the wazoo because you're the guy that walked away. That doesn't mean you use ninjutsu to do it. Okay? And this is the kind of stuff that really, right? These people can smoke others that don't understand it, right? And I don't know what they're smoking, but anyway, they can blow smoke up people's asses until they run into somebody who knows what they're looking at. Okay? And then they get pissed and I suck and I'm fat, bald, and old and like they got nothing else. Anyway, so all right. So so the first thing is shit technique. Second thing is the technique failed and they were forced to switch to something else. That's a type of change as well, right? It's a type of adaptation, okay? But they wouldn't say that what they finished with was a Henka. They went from one technique, one tactic, one strategic kind of thing, right? And they had to switch to something else, right? Because the goal was just to win, right? And in my curriculum, this is up all the way up to second degree black belt, okay? All it matters is that you win. You're able to string your bases together in a logical flow based on what he's doing, and all it matters is that you're winning. But above that, all bets are off. And my Nidans right now are having a hell of a time trying to get the Sandan because they keep trying to memorize technique, right? They're not focused on what we're going to talk about today, this middle section where we start breaking stuff apart and we have to understand certain things that are being done because it's about tactics and strategies, not necessarily moves. Okay. So again, if they finish with something else, that's fine, right? It's just not the original technique, right? As based on Hatsumi Sensei's definition and description at this level. There's others, okay? It's not that variation, used other principles, finished the fight, but it didn't do the same thing the original did. So it doesn't get the original name, okay? If I start off doing koku and finish with renyo or seion or whatever, I don't say that that was a variation of koku or seion or renyo or whatever because it's something different, right? It's not good. It's not that it didn't work. Or it's not that it's not good. Not that it didn't work. It's just not Henka, okay? All right. Hopefully, after all this, right, hashing through, you'll get a glimmer of hopefully what Henka is as I move through this, all right? But first, let's begin with the work I like to do at the beginning of all these things, right? Because we just translated this idea here, right, as it's conventionally understood. But this is where things become a problem, okay? Especially when we're an English speaker trying to study a foreign language that the martial art comes from, and then we're going to whip out our handy-dandy, Japanese to English or whatever dictionary, or we're going to go to Google Translate. Fuck's sake, don't go to Google Translate. Anyway, right? So, but this happens all the time, right? Somebody looks up something because they want to learn how to say please in Japanese. So they look this up and they go, one gai shimasu. Oh, there's another one right here. Dozo. I'll use that one. Okay. Yeah, they both mean please, but the context is completely different, right? They're opposite of each other. Okay. Or we could use sumimasen, or we could use, anyway, right? So this is the kanji for Henka. Okay. 2 kanji, right? Henka. Okay. This first kanji, hen, right? It's the same one in our Tai-hen jutsu, body changing art, body changing skills. But let's look at what this kanji actually means, right? This kanji means strange, or can mean strange. Okay. It can mean funny, as in peculiar, right? Not haha, right? Funny, peculiar. Okay. And it can mean odd. Interesting, huh? Where the hell is change? Where the hell is variation, right? But there's something in here, right? There's something in here. The word ka just means transformation. So if we were doing this literally, what does that kanji translate to? Just like if we're doing shihan. You know, you got all these people running around the martial arts that have the word shihan embroidered on a t-shirt or on their jacket or whatever, because I earned that rank. Except that shihan is an honorific in Japan, and you would never use it on yourself because the kanji break down for shi and han translate to role model. So what you're literally doing when you introduce yourself as shihan whatever, not dai shihan, there's a rank to that, right? But when you're introducing yourself as this thing, I know conventionally there's a translation. But would you walk up to somebody and say, hi, my name is Bob. I'm a role model. You need to do whatever the hell I do because, like, I'm the epitome of this thing? No. Okay. So anyway, right? So what we have is this strange transformation, peculiar transformation, odd transformation. What the hell is that, right? So there's this other idea behind Henka as well, where it means sidestepping. Is that Henka? Sorry. Yeah. So it means to sidestep. Okay. So you're moving along, something's in your way, and you just kind of shift to adapt to it, let it go on, so you can just keep on going. Right. We sidestep. Right. If I'm walking down the sidewalk And mom's, there's this mom coming at me with a kamikaze baby buggy because she's window shopping or whatever and not paying attention, right? I guess I could stop, take up my stance and pop the baby in the face or whatever and knock the whole thing out of the way, but that's not my nature. It might be yours, but anyway, right? But it's moving along here, okay? So here's Henka. I'm walking, mom's not paying attention. She drifts in my direction. I sidestep, but nothing about where I was going changed. Nothing. I just had to sidestep this and keep going, right? But wasn't that kind of an odd or peculiar way to step? Because if I were walking down the street and that mom and that baby buggy's not there, I probably would not be walking along and go, right? Because if I did that, people would look at me like I was fucking high or drunk. Okay? So it's not the same, right? But there's this thing that happened. But where I'm going didn't change. But the way a lot of people write off Henka, sorry, I'm pointing at my notes. The way a lot of people write off Henka is they're walking along, here's kamikaze mom with her baby buggy, and all of a sudden they go, oh, shit, I guess I'm going over here, right? And they go someplace completely different, right? Or they turn around and go back home. Or it's not the same. It's not the same, okay? So there's this really takes place in this Kihon-Happo principle, right? And when I first started in this art, this is what Kihon-Happo was. It was a principle, okay? Were there example techniques? Yeah. But they weren't codified into this like 8 things thing until way later, okay? We're talking mid 80s, okay? Maybe later 80s. So maybe when a bunch of you guys got on board, it was already that way. But this is a principle, right? If we're looking at a list of 8 things, that's not Happo. It would be Happan. Happan. 8 fundamental things. Happo is infinite. Okay? It takes 8, lays it on its side, makes that infinity loop, right? This is infinite, right? So the way the Kihon-Happo principle works is you take any given kata, any given technique, and you make 8 variations, 8 Henka. You change something about them, but they're still based on this, right? So now I have 9 techniques. They're all slight variations of each other because I never know which one I'm going to need when I get where I'm going. But that's not the end of the Kihon-Happo principle. I'm not doing this for all of them, okay? Every one of those Henka, every one of those variations are now treated like they're this guy, and I make 8 variations of them. This will literally keep you busy for a long time, okay? The stamp collectors hate these. The kata collectors hate these, okay? Because it doesn't have a cool name to it. It's the same one, okay? So now how many techniques do I have now, okay? And if I did that to each one, how many techniques? And then I make 8 variations of each of these and 8 variations of each of those until eventually this just becomes one possible combination of those principles in action. Because while we're doing technique, and again, in the beginning, this is all that matters. You copy the damn technique, because if you can't do the technique, no other question matters, no other possibility matters. What if this doesn't work in a fight? Doesn't matter. You can't do it. Guarantee it's not going to work in a fight if you can't do it. Okay? People want to argue whether something will work in a fight or not. Well, if you can't do it, there's no argument. Okay? It's just an asshole with an opinion. Okay? So same thing if somebody's stuck on a technique, right? This absolutely will work in a well, then he better come at you exactly the way this technique needs, right? Otherwise, you've got a disciple asshole with an opinion, okay? So, but this is the process that we use at this middle level. Shu means to copy or preserve, right? So what we're doing here is we're learning the techniques. No variation, no questions. It's either right or it's not. It also means to copy. What am I preserving? Well, you copy your teacher's movement. You copy how your teacher does it. What if my teacher's wrong? Doesn't matter. If your teacher's still working, your teacher will fix it, okay? And if not, you'll get as good at that point. They won't be able to help you beyond it. Go find another teacher, okay? But I'm copying his movement because I can't learn the rest of it until I can do it. It's just like putting a drop of something in a petri dish and letting it grow for a little while, and then I start to look at it, but I don't do experiments with it until I understand what the hell it is. Okay? So this is the first stage, right? We learn how to do it. This stage, ha, right, means to break. We're going to break it apart, right? And we're going to understand each part. What are we understanding? We're understanding the principles and concepts that it's using, right? We're understanding what it's doing to him, that kind of thing, right? How do we do variations and substitute one strike for another, or a kick for a strike, or a grab or a lock, or a throw for a strike, or a strike for a lock, or whatever? How do we do that if we don't know what is supposed to be going on? Okay, and this plays into techniques, tactics, and strategies, and all these things overlap, right? But we do this a lot until we hit a point where we can forget technique, right? Because we've got so many of them. One, it's impossible to freaking remember everything, right? But you want to get to a point where you are learning it, you are understanding it, you own it, okay? You're trying to get it right. You're trying to understand what makes right right. You can't get it wrong, even if you tried. You don't even have to think about it, right? It's a very different transition, but people want to go like they can just, what they're trying to do is be Hatsumi Sensei while they're imitating Hatsumi Sensei. Hopefully they're not imitating him now. I love my teacher to death, but he's in a wheelchair. So be careful what you imitate, okay? So the Kyonapo principle is about change, right? It's about this idea of change, okay? So again, it fits into this ha stage, right? Shu, again, first you learn the technique correctly. Ha, then you learn to break it down into its constituent parts so that you can understand the principles at play, right? And then you go through a transformation stage, that kind of thing, where you move as pure principle in action. And I know how woo-woo that sounds, right? But you're leaving technique behind, okay? Anyway, let's keep going, right? So what we're focusing on today with Henka is this ha stage, obviously. How many times do I got to repeat it, right? But we're going to take a look at it from this idea of kotsu, okay? So if you're watching this today, November 15th, as I'm doing this thing live, then tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, I am doing a free online training. It's a workshop, a little bit of demonstration, but mostly going into some things here. I'm going to be teaching on the 4 pillars of what I call the warrior tactician, right? The guy that can apply, or the girl that can apply tactics to control the bubble and break his advantages, those kind of things. This is way different than technique, okay? But technique points to this stuff, okay? So, but to give you a heads up, right? One of those 4 pillars is this kotsu, okay? Kotsu, not kotsu as in sternum, okay? Or bone, right? Not kotsu as in ego. Did you know that in Japan, the sternum is known as the ego bone? Because people with big egos do this. Walk around with that thing jutting out, okay? So interesting stuff, right? I once heard a master teacher that I trained with for decades afterwards. My first experience with him was in a room where he's teaching this stuff. And there's all these high-level people standing around just kind of holding on to their belts, nodding in agreement, looking at everybody else like, I understand, don't you, right? And right there, bold face as anything, the Japanese instructors talking about the kotsu, right? And how ego is also kotsu. And in Japan, this is called the kotsu bone, right? The big ego bone, right? And he looks around the room and he goes, many people in here have big ego bone. I think so, right? And these same guys kept doing this. It was freaking hilarious. Anyway, right? So kotsu, it's not those translations, right? Kotsu means essential nature. Okay? I could have said essence, but to some people, essence means how something smells, right? What's its essence? Well, I don't know. For them, it's perfume and lilac. For them, it's shit, right? No, essential nature. What is the technique doing? Right? What is its nature? What is it designed for? It's like a tool or a weapon. Like it's the essential nature of a sword to cut. You don't have to try to cut with a sword. It's the essential nature of a wheel or a tire to roll. Okay? Not to lay flat, not to wobble and fall over. Okay? So what's the essential nature? Okay? And that's where we have to dive in when we're looking at techniques. Okay? So the question is, what is the technique doing? Okay? And it's doing something, it's teaching something at different levels for the student. But again, we're here. Okay? When we start thinking about tactics, we start thinking about strategies and not just moves as what dictates whether or not the technique is correct, right? This is all about principles, okay? So what's the technique doing? What's the combat strategy of the technique itself, right? Like in Koku, the technique or the combat strategy of Koku in the Gyoko school is the same one as Yokuto in the Koto school, same first level, same first technique. It's to play in space. It's to find the way. Right? The principle in those kata are the same primary principles as the entire Togakure school and the entire Shinden Furoryu, which is to find the most natural way. Right? So, great. Okay. That's kind of open. Right? But there's other things going on. Okay. So, are we talking about the technique? Are we talking about the lineage? Whatever. Okay. So, here's the thing. It's really easy to say, the essential nature of this technique is to win. No shit. I hope so. I hope you're not like some of these karate lineages that have kata where you're supposed to die in the end, right? You keep fighting until you die because you're learning this idea of fortitude. You're learning to die with humility. That's why I don't do that shit. That's why I'm doing this, right? Okay. A ninja may die, but not because I'm supposed to be happy about screwing up, right? But at the upper levels, the question is, where do we need him to be at the end of this engagement? Again, remember I said that this normal change, adaptation, when, doesn't matter how, whatever. In my curriculum, it leads up to Nidan. Okay, for those of you who've been around Bujinkan for a while, things I've heard from Hatsumi Sensei and whatnot, what I look for Nidan, general Bujinkan ranking, we're looking at 8th to 9th Dan. Okay. I'm not having this discussion. Okay. So, but where's it supposed to be going? So up to Nidan, it is to win, right? Right. And even Nagato Sensei has said, you don't have to win, just don't lose. Okay. So even if you both go home safely, right? As long as I survive, that's all that matters. Okay. But again, my curriculum, Sandan and above, general Japanese Bujinkan stuff, we're looking at 9th, 10th Dan and above, right? We have to start looking at, what if I need this guy in a specific place? What if I'm a police officer? What if I'm security? What if this guy came into my house? I talk about this stuff all the time, right? And I need him out the closest door, or in my instance, I've already told the local cops, all exits from my house are at least one story off the floor. So whichever is closer, door or window, that's his exit point. Okay. So if that's where I need to lead him, or again, if I need to get him over the hood of a car, if I need to get him flat on his chest so I can get zip ties or cuffs on him or whatever, then everything that I do, the technique that I choose, should have him ending like that. Okay. Or if I get him to the ground and I choose Dogaish from Tagagi Yoshin, right? He's on the ground and I use an arm bar leverage to flip him over so he's chest down, right? That makes it super easy. Now I can continue to control things and get him tied up, right? So what's the end game, right? What's the end game? So we're gonna focus on Ichimonji Kata because most people that are following me have been doing Bujinkan for a while. You know what this is, or it's easy to look up. Okay, so Ichimonji no Kata. We're gonna get past the beginner stuff. Like the point of Ichimonji no Kamae is to teach you how to enter in a way that he can't defend, he can't escape, those kind of things. And you're learning to strike while stepping. Okay? You're learning to strike while stepping. In Jumonji no Kata, right, you're opening up a window, making it difficult for him to escape and all that kind of stuff, but you're defending and striking with the same hand. You're striking without stepping. Okay? Hicho, you have all these things, right? So we're going to start with this one just because everybody tends to know it. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at 4 things that we could do with Ichimonji no Kata to break it apart, to understand how the kata is manipulating the attacker and the situation. So when we start switching things out, we're doing the same thing. We may not be doing it the same way, but we get the same result. And Ichimonji no Kata just means, right, an example for how to use Ichimonji no Kamae in combat. Okay? So it's not crystallized either, but we're staying here. We're not up here. Okay? And then we're going to take a look right here. I just wrote how to make Henka. But what I want to do is I want to take a look at several considerations for taking this idea and instead of just ad hoc making stuff, because this is the omote side of it. Okay, the omote side of it is this is how Takamatsu Sensei taught it, right? Make variations, make variations, make variations until eventually this one everything just becomes the same, right? Mikyo, we say it's over in the earth realm, right? It's the realm of equanimity. Okay, everything is equal, right? Not that it doesn't mean that one is better or not for any given situation, but it means I don't have any favorites or preferences. Okay, so we have all those. But the Uda of this, the other way to do this, and that will help make these even better, is to come at it from what kind of variables could be going on in an attack scenario against a real person out in the world, not in the dojo where everything's nice and sanitized and you got a nice flat even floor, we're all in socks or tabi, right? We're in comfortable clothing, we're not between 2 parked cars in a parking lot, whatever, right? So we can use some of these considerations to help build these. And I only threw out 7 of them. Okay, there's way more, right? Because we have limited time, right? You have a life, I have a life, right? I just want to give you enough to get started or to whet your appetite to maybe where you want to pop back in and do something else. Okay, all right. So with Ichimonji no Kata, right? We should, once we learn it, right? We start coming up here and we're playing around with this kotsu thing, right? And we start to understand it, right? So we begin by breaking it down and taking a look at what it's doing. In the beginning, what it's doing doesn't matter. What it's doing is teaching you how to move your damn body so you can do the different moves and parts on balance with power. That's all that matters right here. That's all that matters. I know. The Western mind, I'm not doing it if I don't know why it would be used or, well, go find something else. Okay? You either trust that this stuff works, and there's a time, right? There's a time. The high level of training, right? I was in here, okay? And I and several of my friends took a year off. We didn't take a year off of training. I used to say it that way. We took a year off of learning more techniques, and we went and trained with people from other martial arts because we were trying to figure out if this would break. Ego doesn't like doing stuff like that. Ego just wants to hold on to it, right? Because it needs to religiously believe that it needs for it to work, okay? And we found lots of times when our technique failed. But when we were honest with ourselves, what we found was we were applying the wrong technique against the wrong fight style, which is actually one of these considerations we're going to talk about, okay? So anyway, we're going to break this down and look at each move to understand the purpose of the move, right? So there's 4, again, let's keep this simple. There's 4 stages that I'm writing down today. If I were really doing this the Japanese way, I would avoid 4. I would have done 3 or 5 because 4 is a bad number in Japan, okay? So we could look at the evasion, right? How are we evading? What does that do to him, Okay. And again, there are these other principles and whatnot. I don't want to like just give everything away. Show up for tonight's extra training and whatnot, and you will have a whole bunch of other things that go on in here. Okay. But there's an evasion stage. Okay. When do I move? Where do I move? That kind of thing. Right. Okay. There is this idea of uke nagash. A lot of people like to say blocking. You can say whatever you want, doesn't make it right. Okay. Well, I call it blocking. Well, then that's all you're ever going to think about. Okay. Uke nagash, right? Receiving flow, receiving stop, right? How do I trap him with this, right? What is this doing to him in the context of Ichimonji no kata? Okay. Because it's different. It's the same, but different when it's done using koku or when we're doing, let's see, if you were at this week's, if you're in my Ninpo masterclass or my platinum training group or the really upper level tiers and whatnot, or the Shinobi Kai program here, this past Tuesday, we looked at this uke nagash, and I did something Tagagi Yoshin style where I literally just step back into kamae and turn my hand upside down. Okay. And it's doing two things, right? So it's not the same as what Ichimonji no kata does in the way that it controls somebody. Okay. There's also this idea of iri. Right? Iri means entering. Okay. How am I entering so that he doesn't recover and so that it's a clear shot? He can't escape, right? Whatever I caught with this to trap him, I don't lose here because this is the stage between here in the context of Ichimonji no kata, right? There and the strike. But there's stuff that follows this too, right? There's the he's crashing toward the ground. There's the lock and immobilization, right? Or the finish or whatever, right? So all these things. So when we're in here, we need to understand what's the overall nature of Ichimonji no kata, right? Ichimonji kata, right? What is the, and then what's being applied? How is this kata teaching us a way to control this bubble and control this person? Okay. So again, it's a place, right? It's a place to start, right? Oh, you know what? I almost forgot. So I did want to hint at something other, right? Because I know there's going to be people going, that's not the way I learned it. I'm not here to argue anybody's learning thing. That's not the way I understood it. Okay. So we already talked about what this is. We're going through this way of looking at it, right? We already looked at what the people that like to bullshit themselves do, right? But there is something beyond this. Okay. This is where the magic really comes in, right? Hatsumi Sensei, so this is Hen, right? This is Ka. So this is the one that means transformation, okay? But Hatsumi Sensei he likes to, well, he still does it, right? Likes to do kanji switching, right? Where the word still sounds the same, but there's a nuanced meaning in there, right? And one of the things he's done with this is to write the Ka here for Henka. Do I have enough room here somewhere? I'm gonna get rid of this part. You already have it, right? You've memorized it. Awesome. Okay. Oops. Ka. Fire. So now we have a peculiar, strange, odd fire. What the hell is that? Okay. Or a changing fire, right? Well, in this case, what you're pointing at is a candle flame is never the same. As a matter of fact, it's damn near ethereal because you can't grab it and pick it up, right? If you go for it too lightly, you'll burn yourself. If you go to it too hard, you snuff it out. But no matter how much it flickers, right? The wind touches it, all kinds of things happen. It flickers, it dances, it elongates, it drops, it operates based on what kind of fuel and how the fuel is changing on the candle or the lantern it's working with, right? But this kotsu, this essential nature, never changes. Never changes. It's always the same. Okay? So there's ways to do your techniques and all that kind of stuff. Way over here, okay? Not there. Okay. So anyway, so let's jump to this because we're running short on time. Okay. So let's see. Let's just jump into this piece over here. Right. So here's some considerations for how to think about how and why we might need Henka, or we need to have other ways to do the same techniques, right? From a street perspective, from the guys in your house, from he kicked in the door into the stall to the frickin' travel rest stop or the roadside rest stop toilet stall that you're in, and now he's in, right? And you're boxed in, or you're between two parked cars, or whatever, right? You're on a staircase, whatever. Okay. So when we start thinking about those things, in this case, right, what a lot of people do, and we do the same thing as well for the black belts, we'll pick a scenario and then they need to operate within that. And so what they have to be able to do is pick and choose from their skills. Is Ganseki a good skill for in here? Is Omotegyaku, is, if you hit him at the side of his neck and knock him sideways, is there a wall right there that he can stop himself or whatever? Okay. So in this case, we're not doing Henka. We're doing adaptation, but it's more like Randori, right? We're fitting into the situation because of the environment. In this case, we're using environmental, or not just environmental factors, we're using real world factors that we need to consider to do this, to make our variations. Okay. So what I want you to think about is Ichimonji no kata now being run through this filter. Okay. Because Ichimonji no kata, we can run it through this filter and just be making variation, right? Like doing Ichimonji no kata starting in Jumonji no kata. Doing Ichimonji no kata starting in Hicho or Hira or any other kamae, right? That's here, okay? This one, so we're not, as I name things, we don't have a whole bunch of techniques that we're just swapping out because, well, that one would work there, or that one would work. No. I get it. But we're working with Henka. We're working with Henka from this perspective, okay? So I kept saying environmental because my mom was jumping ahead, right? So one of those factors is environmental. Uh-oh. Adapt and overcome. Please note, in the context of today's class, I did not vary how I used the black marker. I swapped out for a completely different marker. So while I adapted to a problem with my marker, I didn't switch out to this one, and now I'm going to convince you that I'm still writing using black. That's what I meant by the people that have crap technique, but they try to say that what they're doing is Henka. Okay? So environmental. What kind of environmental ones? Well, ground surface. Okay, and how that is going to affect our footwork, right? One of my guys is 80-ish, right? Joints are really stiff. This guy's had bulls crash and fall on him. I used to do logging and freaking trees that fall on him, whatever. This guy's, but he's also done Tai Chi and all that kind of cool stuff, right? So while a bunch of students in class are wearing socks or tabi or whatever, he can't, his feet don't allow for that, right? So he wears walking shoes, okay? He has to move his feet differently on this indoor-outdoor carpet that we have in here or he would have to walk on tatami than people that are in socks, okay? So 2 days out of every month in the dojo, if you come to class during those days, or if you are on one of the virtual classes, or there's been times I've done a whiteboard Wednesday because that happened to fall on a street closed day. And so I'm not in even part of my gi. I'm in jeans, loafers, whatever, right? Sneakers and a polo shirt because that's what I normally wear. Okay, I might even be in a blazer and a button down with a tie. Okay, because clothing and how, in this case, how the shoes affect, right, the grip to the ground and how I'm going to have to adapt my stepping, even if the model itself is exactly the way I learned it, something has to change. because of what my shoes are doing as they interact with the ground surface. Or if there are roots coming up out of the ground, stones, uneven sidewalk, curb, whatever. Okay. So here's this, right? I think some people that walk around in sandals and flip-flop all the time, then they take them off for training. I think they need to keep them on, because if they get attacked quickly, they're going to find out that certain sandals and whatnot, or flip-flops, will twist underneath their foot. And then that digs in between the toes, or it cuts into things. And now you need to continue to fight and do your technique while your brain is trying to ignore the fact that you just ripped your foot apart or broke a toe. Okay. So anyway, environmental, right? Ground, shoes, okay? The space around us. Okay. What kind of space do we have? Right? Even if I'm between two parked cars, the channel goes this way, right? Only if he's in front of me. If he's over here, and this is where Koto Ryu's Kuraidori comes in, right? If he's right here and the channel between us, the cars are parked this way, but we're this way. See, the space is different over here than it is over here. It's different behind him than it is behind me. Interesting, right? Okay. So this also starts to point to obstacles, right? I already started talking about that with the, tree root coming up out of the ground or uneven sidewalk or whatever. But you could be in your house. It could be a coffee table. It could be a piece of furniture. It could be an office desk chair. It could whatever, right? What do you have in the way? Okay. This also leads to obstacles, space, all that, right? Walls. I already mentioned it, right? Cars, right? Whatever. Okay. So here, what I'm looking at are things that can catch him or that he can use to brace against. Okay. If I'm dealing with somebody and let's say I'm doing ganseki, I know we're talking about here, but I pick a forward hip throw, right? And I go to turn him because it's like one of my favorite cool techniques. And I go to turn him, but there's a wall right here. So the wall is slightly too far, and experience will tell you what that is. It's too far for me to do the actual throw to slam his head into it. Now, if he were way closer, that'd be different, right? But there's a certain distance right here. But that distance is perfect for him to instinctively reach out and brace himself to jam up the throw. Okay? So perhaps ganseki wasn't the best option in that moment, which is why everybody has 4 variations of ganseki in our Mod 3 curriculum. Okay? Because I may not be able to send him. I may have to drop him. I may need to pull him. I may need to break him in place. Okay. So anyway, there's those. Okay. Another one is the range between us. The range between bodies. Ichimonji no kata, if we do it based on Gyoko-ryu, there is a specific bubble. There's a specific space in there. If we do Ichimonji no kata, but we use Seigan from Koto-ryu, that bubble is different. If we use Doko, a lot of you guys don't even know what that is. We used to train with that all the time, right? But it's somewhere in the middle, right? So there's an effective bubble, right? There's this idea of orbiting and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but the range between us, right? How do I do Ichimonji no kata when he's like right here? Right? How do I do Ichimonji no kata when he's farther away? How do I do Ichimonji no kata? Do I have, I don't have it on here, so we'll just throw this one in here as well, but the angle, right? Okay. How do I do Ichimonji no kata if I go outside the punch instead of inside the punch like the basic model is? Okay. How do I do Ichimonji no kata if I go outside the punch against a boxer throwing a right cross or a Taekwondo person throwing a roundhouse kick as opposed to these straight on things? Okay. So, and that's even if I don't change out the fist. Okay. So that points to the next one, right? His fight style. Right? Every fight style, punch is a punch is a punch, except that every fight style, there's nuances to how those punches are thrown. Okay. Some people throw things and the elbow comes up, right? Different styles, but right. The elbow comes up or the elbow stays under or stays tucked in, right? Some people, their style is just, right? So how do you make it work? Okay. When you're doing this, you will find when not only while you're trying to figure out how to use a technique in certain context, you may and hopefully will figure out when Ichimonji no kata or any technique is not on the list of possibilities in this scenario. Okay? That's called wisdom. Okay? That's called, right? I understand the nature of it, and I understand there are certain situations this is a bad choice for. This gets way away from this guy who wants to just idealize everything. If it's ninjutsu, man, there's just nothing better. Yeah, there is. The one that knocks you out because your ego led instead of your freaking awareness. Okay? Apparently his technique in that moment was better, and it will be. Okay? Never let your cockiness and your ego rule the day, because if you do, then you will rue the day. Anyway, right? So fight style, let's see, size differences. Size, height differences between his body and mine. You guys have seen James, right? Helps me run things and all that. I'm 5'6" and change. James is 6'3". Okay? Doing Ichimonji no kata as is, and I'm supposed to hit him here, that's going to be different. Okay? So something's got to change in here if that's going to be delivered as it's supposed to be. Or that strike or that thing that I do to him that's supposed to knock him in a certain direction and knock him off balance a certain way, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, okay? Then I have to pick a different target, okay? One of the variations, okay? Multiple attackers changes things. Okay? So I may be doing Ichimonji no kata, and his friend starts running in from this angle over here. He's right in front of me. So I shift in a way to hit that knocks him into his partner. Okay? Or hits where I drop him so he becomes a speed bump for his partner, and it gives me an avenue and a change and all that, right? So multiple attackers, right? How do I do that? Okay? Armor considerations. Sensei, I'm not in the military. I'm not a cop. I'm not Ninja Japan. What the hell are you talking about with armor? Well, if you live in a place like I do, where at least a third of the year it's cold as shit and you're wearing heavier coats and gloves and things like that, right? Hitting the same target just because the kata says so, not going to work so well, right? But what about natural body armor? This guy's 375 pounds, 6'5", and just has a whole bunch of natural body armor where, yeah, the nerve endings hurt when you hit him, but you're not doing any real damage. So unless he's a wuss, that pain isn't going to do anything. Okay? But armor, right? If something's in the way, or he sees it coming in and he shifts a hand up here to stop that from happening, right? I better be able to adjust from someplace easy, and I'm not overcommitting to something where I can't change. Okay? So, and again, running through these things and doing Henka makes this better, because you start to understand that, well, that would be a good variation, but I can't get there from here. Okay? You run that up to the tree with your seniors or your teacher or whatever, and they go, yep, you're right. You can't get there from there. Or they go, no, you can't get there from there because you do your strike like this instead of like this. Okay? So you're right. You can't get there, but you can do it. You're just going to have to fix the kata and the way you strike so that you have more flexibility and freedom of movement. Okay? Armor considerations, did all that kind of stuff. And then here, we're going to end with this one, right? Others with me. Other people that are with me, okay? Might have my 4-year-old grandson and my daughter. I might have my wife. I might be with friends or whatever who can't defend themselves. Last thing I want to be doing is doing a technique in a way, in a direction or whatever, where I avoid, and he goes, oh, this guy's slick. How about if I just zip a freaking headlock on his wife and now tell him he's going to comply or I'm going to snap her damn neck? Okay? Or I drill this guy, he falls on my 4-year-old grandson, crippling my grandson. Okay? So all this stuff, right? All this stuff. And this isn't even, right? Because we can be throwing in weapons. We can, again, do inside, outside, change levels, right? His punch was high. We're going to change it to low or even mid. It's not a punch. It's a kick. It's a, right? All kinds of things here, okay? So this is why, again, when we go back to these and we're playing with these, right? This is why we practice doing techniques using other kami. So Ichimonji no kami, we typically start here, right? And we come in and do our thing, but we could start and then move from there. But we might have to back out because this is by default, it's a closer range kami, right? Or I move to something else, right, to come in, because each of those factors influences how he moves, and how he moves that target, okay? Where do I need him to end up? I talked about that earlier, right? Where do I need him to end up? If I need him on the ground because I don't need this guy stumbling, catching his balance and the fight going longer, and I'm up here to come down and strike this way, no. I'm going to go up here so he does this. So I'm going to strike this way right here to break him down because I want him right here, okay? So I can draw, tell him if you move, you lose your face. Okay. So either way, that's what. So we do technique using other kami. We replace strikes with kicks, kicks with whatever. Okay. We look at the end game and choose from there. Okay. So anyway, that's what I have. Again, this Friday's class is Friday's virtual class. There's the URL as usual. We're going to be working through some of these things so that people get a better understanding of what allows for a Henka to still be called the root technique's name, right? We start from here, and then we're going to break the technique. This isn't scrambled egg salad. This isn't, we're going to throw a whole bunch of techniques in and then just do whatever, okay? That's like it's like a teenager, okay? Teenager has one or two answers for things that happen day to day or nearly day to day for them. And they confuse that with knowing everything, right? And so when you start talking about things that are outside their realm, what you're going to hear from them is either that makes no sense or, yeah, but see, I'll just, right? Because what they're going to do is they're going to start trying to hammer square pegs into round holes and things like that. And that's what these people do when they're trying to move to here without doing the understanding phase, because they confuse learning something and understanding the basics for day to day with how a master looks at things, processes things, understands things, owns the technique at a very deep muscular or even cellular level, okay? Where, understanding that this has a place to go as well, right? Because again, we're still in here, okay? Technique development. Anyway, that's what I have. Go to that URL, right? That'll be open for registration until, what do? We close that down an hour and a half before the actual class starts because we can't be processing people last minute because we have classes that start on Friday at a certain point, and nobody is manning the house online to make sure that you slide in under the wire and then we get you into the class, right? So 4:30 p.m. Eastern time on Friday, it's Friday the 17th, will be your deadline for getting in for that class to take a look at more things this way. But we also have this thing at 8 p.m. tonight if you're listening or watching this on November 15th. Okay, there may be a recording I haven't decided yet that I may put out, but we're looking to start this new 16-week program that's springboarding off that next week, no later than the following Monday, because we have to get through our Thanksgiving holiday, right? But we're going to be starting that very, very quickly, and doors will be open, people can get in, and then we're closing the doors, and that's the people I'm going to be working with because that's all I have as far as time and effort and energy. Because we're literally relaunching, redoing all the lessons, including the format and everything in our current online training course. And anybody that's been around for a while, they know that we went from several weekend seminars where everything was taught that you had to kind of extrapolate the lessons and a couple of like silent little technique kind of things all in one place, to when we just finished up doing mod 1, and people ended up in 16 weeks getting 54 techniques and or their variations. They ended up getting 61 minimum skill lessons and or drills, right? All these are separate videos. And I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 or 65 or 64, 65 personal development lessons. Okay. And mod 2 is going to be the same thing. Okay. So, but mod 2, mod 1, form, basic street self-defense against the most common things. Mod 2 is you better have some tactical and strategic know-how for breaking this type down, because in mod 2, the attacker that we deal with is somebody who's either really, really fast, or they've got this jackhammer kind of thing, and you're in an overwhelmed situation and you need to neutralize that so that you have a rat's chance in hell of winning. Okay. And you have to know more than just technique. Okay. All right. Anyway, that's what I have. Hopefully I'll see you on Friday. Hopefully I'll see you tonight. And if not, well, maybe I'll see you next week on next week's episode of Whiteboard Wednesday.